Okay, there are 6 movements that the femur can make at the hip joint. The femur is the single long bone in the upper leg. It's the longest bone in the human body. And we want to take a look at the movement of the femur within the context of a baseball swing. More specifically, what are the primary force-producing movements of the femur at the hip joint? I'm going to try to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible. And remember, we're focused here at the hip joint only. We're not going to concern ourselves, here at the knee with regard to flexion, extension at the knee or anything going on at the ankle. Simply, what is the femur doing at the hip joint? In addition, here we're only concerned with the back leg. So, movement of the femur only and the back leg only is what we're concerned with here. Okay, this is extension of the femur at the hip joint. Here the thigh is pulled backwards primarily by the hamstrings as well as the gluteal muscles. Alright, here we have flexion of the femur at the hip joint where the thigh is pulled forward in front of us. Shown here is the psoas and the rectus femoris, one of the quadricep muscles that are primary in this. Also involved is the sartorius as well as the iliacus. Neither extension nor flexion of the femur at the hip joint is seen in the back leg during the baseball swing. The femur is not extending or being pulled backwards, nor is the femur going through flexion at the hip joint where the thigh is being pulled forward. Now let's take a look at adduction and abduction of the femur at the hip joint. Let's start down here with adduction of the femur at the hip joint, which is again bringing the femur towards the median sagittal plane of the body, or simply bringing the leg towards the body. And again, the way to remember that is, it's like you're adding the limb towards the body, not taking away. Somewhat simply stated, both adduction and abduction are sideways or lateral movements. You can see here the adductor brevis longus magnus positioned here on the inside of the femur, positioned to increase the ability to pull the leg towards the body. Adduction of the back femur can be seen in some players during the loading phase of the baseball swing, but adduction of the femur is not seen in the back leg as the hitter unloads into the pitch during the powerful unloading phase of the swing. Abduction of the femur at the hip joint is driven by the 3 gluteal muscles, minimus, medius, and maximus, with the primary mover being the gluteus medius. Abduction of the femur at the hip joint is the movement of the bone away from the median sagittal plane. And again, simply speaking, that's the sideways movement of the femur. You can see here the gluteal muscles positioned on the outside of the femur to pull it in that direction. For the hitter, with the back foot grounded during the stride, this abduction of the femur is what moves the batter towards the pitch, or begins to shift the body's center of gravity towards the oncoming pitch. These are strong, powerful muscles that abduct the femur, and this is easily, far and away, the most powerful movement that the rear femur makes during hitting or throwing. Probably the easiest way to feel this is in the infielder's throw. The first unloading movement you will make in the direction of your target is this abduction of the femur at the hip joint. You can feel how the abduction works against the ground, creates force against the ground, and moves your body laterally into the direction of your target. Again, that is the primary force generator of the back femur, and you should be able to feel how this abduction begins the unloading of the throw process. It should feel quick and it should feel powerful. Okay, the last 2 movements at the hip joint are concerned with the turning or rotation of the femur. external rotation, the turning outward of the femur, and internal rotation or medial rotation, the turning inward of the femur. Here we can see the short external rotators and how these muscles are positioned to turn that bone outwards or to externally rotate the femur. They include the superior and inferior gemellus, the obturators, the quadratus femoris, and the piriformis. They are assisted by the gluteus maximus and the sartorius. In the baseball swing or the baseball throw, during the stride phase, if the back foot is grounded and the femur externally rotates, the hip will open to the target, or during the baseball swing, the pelvis will open towards the pitcher. So, again, our focus here is on, how the back leg is functioning, specifically the back femur during the baseball swing. And in that context, the important thing to think about here and to understand is the turning outward of the leg, or the turning outward of the foot is what people kind of feel. The turning outward of the foot, the grounded back foot or grounded back leg that will open the pelvis, not the turning inward. Okay, so it's this external rotation, this turning outward of the foot or leg that will open the pelvis to the pitcher. So, back leg grounded external rotation will open the pelvis towards the pitcher. Turning the foot inward, if it is grounded, will do the opposite. External rotation of the femur works with, in varying degrees, the primary function of abduction at the femur during the unloading phase of the baseball swing. So with regard to the back leg during the unloading phase of the baseball swing, the primary action is abduction, and it is assisted in varying degrees by the foot or leg trying to turn outward, which is going to open the pelvis. So again, while the foot is grounded during the unloading phase of the back leg, it is primarily and sometimes exclusively abduction of the back femur that is usually assisted by, in varying degrees, by the turning outward, not inward, outward of the femur, the external rotation of the femur. Abduction assisted by external rotation. Actively or excessively externally rotating the femur while the front foot is in the air during the stride would cause the pelvis to fly open prematurely. The hitter or the thrower should try to direct force in a straight line. Now, the body trying to direct force in a straight line doesn't mean that body parts are not rotating. So the hitter should simply focus on directing force in a straight line at the baseball and not trying to spin his legs or spin his feet. By attempting to send force in a straight line, he will abduct at the femur, or at the hip joint I should say. He will simply push or press sideways, and in order to create this sideways push or press, the hitter will abduct the femur. As part of this straight line directed force, varying degrees of unforced external rotation of the femur will occur. The abduction of the femur, pressing on the pelvis as the hitter directs force at the baseball, combined in varying degrees with the grounded external rotation of the back foot, will open the pelvis before the front heel plants. But this action should be completed without a sense that the hitter is forcing rotation or forcing turn. And the great majority of pelvic rotation happens after the front heel drops and blocks and the pelvis is opened from the front. A force is delivered from the back, but the bracing, blocking, working front leg is responsible for most of the pelvic rotation in the baseball swing. And lastly, let's look at internal rotation of the femur at the hip joint, or turning the leg inward. There are no prime internal rotators, but there are some secondary movers. I've drawn in here the TFL, the tensor fasciae latae. Other secondary movers are the medial hamstrings, the adductor longus and brevis, and just the anterior fibers of the gluteus medius and minimus. In trying to understand what is powering the baseball swing, it's important to know that the internal rotation, the medial rotation of the femur, is easily the weakest of these 6 actions, and it's much weaker even than external rotation. In other words, the action itself, the action of turning the femur inward, is going to produce less force than rotating the femur outward. Internal rotation, again, a much less powerful action than even external rotation. And this movement has nowhere near the capacity of the action, the joint action of abduction of the femur at the hip joint with regards to producing power. But the most convincing fact that internal rotation of the back femur isn't powering the baseball swing is simply the movement itself. If the foot is grounded, applying significant force against the ground, while the front foot is in the air, internally rotating the femur will close the pelvis away from the pitcher. It will not move the center of gravity towards the target, and it will not open the pelvis toward the target, which is the oncoming pitch. Though I don't recommend it, actively internally rotating the femur during the loading phase can occur. What is going on across the nation, and what is going on here, and it's been happening over the course of the last 15 years, is this idea of a internally rotating femur, a spinning back leg, turning the foot in, squishing the bug. They're all the same in that they feel like that the turning inward of the back leg is powering the swing, and they feel like that the inward spinning, turning back leg is rotating the pelvis. In other words, when they say, get your hips into it, you will immediately see the coach or the player internally rotate the femur, spin the back foot towards the pitcher, shoelaces towards the pitcher, and they think that that is powering the swing and powering rotation. It is not. The back leg does not internally rotate until after the back leg has unloaded, unweighted, or until the front heel gets down, or a combination of all three, which then allows the back foot to slip or slide. If the foot or leg were truly creating force, applying force against the ground, turning the leg inward, internally rotating the femur, would turn the pelvis the wrong way. It would close the pelvis to the pitcher while the front foot was in the air. Or even after the front foot touched down, for that matter, assuming the back leg is still, applying a significant amount of force, the back foot is still grounded, the internal rotation of the femur would close the pelvis off. It would not open the hips. The internal rotation of the back leg should not be forced. It should be a natural follow-through, an after effect, if you will, to the previous unloading of the back leg done primarily through abduction of the femur at the hip joint. The sliding, slipping, spinning back foot or leg that we see while the femur is turning in, internally rotating during the unloading phase contributes little to the force production in the baseball swing. It of course should be allowed to happen. The internal rotation of the leg should be allowed to happen as part of a proper fluid follow-through. But turning the leg in, spinning the leg in, internally rotating the foot or femur is not a significant force contributor to to the baseball swing.